Say that again, I said, before I realized people like him weren't used to being challenged. The words left my mouth anyway, hanging in the air like something fragile that refused to break. The entire restaurant went still. Glasses paused halfway to lips. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the soft jazz playing overhead felt like it had stepped back to watch. I could feel every eye turned toward me, but I didn't look away. Not from him. Not from the man everyone else avoided meeting for more than a second. Dominic Varelli stood across the table, one hand resting near the documents I had just spilled water on. The paper edges curled slightly, ink bleeding in slow, deliberate lines. Whatever was written there mattered. I didn't need to understand it to feel the weight of it. His gaze didn't shift to the damage. It stayed on me. Dark, focused, unblinking. I felt it like pressure against my skin, like standing too close to something powerful and not knowing if it would burn. Repeat what you just heard, he said, voice low enough that only I could catch every word, but firm enough that the entire room understood the command. My pulse hammered in my throat. I could hear it louder than the music, louder than the silence. I should have apologized. I should have stepped back, lowered my head, done what every other server here knew to do. But something in me refused. Maybe it was the exhaustion from a double shift. Maybe it was the bruise hidden beneath my sleeve, still aching from a life I hadn't fully escaped yet. Or maybe it was the way he said it, like I was already something he owned. I tilted my head slightly, just enough to show I wasn't backing down. Say that again. The words came out steadier than I felt. For a second, nothing happened. Then the silence deepened, thick enough to feel. One of the men behind him shifted his weight. Another glanced toward the exit like calculating distance. They were waiting. For him. For a signal that never came. Dominic didn't move right away. He studied me instead, like I was something out of place in a room he controlled. Something that didn't follow the rules he was used to. Then, slowly, something changed. Not in the room. In him. The corner of his mouth lifted, barely noticeable, but enough to send a ripple through the air. It wasn't amusement. It wasn't anger either. It was something sharper. More interested. He stepped closer, closing the distance between us with quiet confidence. I could smell his cologne now, expensive and clean, layered over something colder underneath. You're either very brave, he said softly, so only I could hear, or you don't understand who you're talking to. I didn't step back. My hands stayed steady at my sides, even though every instinct screamed at me to move. I understand enough, I replied. Another pause. Another breath held by the entire room. His eyes flickered down for half a second, to the water spreading across the table, then back to me. You just interrupted a deal worth $3 million, he said. No anger. Just fact. My stomach tightened, but I kept my expression still. Then maybe you shouldn't leave sensitive things where a waitress can reach them, I said. It wasn't smart. It wasn't safe. But it was honest. And something about honesty felt like the only thing I had left. That was when the shift happened. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a subtle change in the air that told me I had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Dominic leaned in slightly, close enough that his voice brushed against my ear. Now tell me, he murmured, calm and controlled. Why shouldn't I keep you exactly where you are? His question settled over me like a weight I could not ignore, calm and quiet, but impossible to escape. I felt every set of eyes still watching, waiting for me to either break or disappear. I did neither. I held his gaze, even as my heartbeat threatened to betray me. Because I am not something you can keep, I said, my voice steady enough to surprise even me. A flicker passed through his eyes, quick but real, like I had said something unexpected. No one behind him moved. They were still waiting for a command that did not come. Dominic straightened slightly, studying me with a new kind of attention, less like a threat and more like a problem he wanted to solve. Everyone can be kept, he replied, almost thoughtful. They just have a price. I shook my head once, slow and deliberate. Then you are looking at the wrong person. The words hung between us, sharp and clean. For a second, I thought I had pushed too far. Then he exhaled softly, not frustrated, not angry, just considering. His hand moved, not toward me, but toward the soaked documents. He lifted the top page, glanced at the damage, then set it aside without a hint of irritation. That was what unsettled me the most. Not anger, not control, just choice. What is your name? He asked. The question shifted something in the room. It was no longer about the mistake. It was about me. Lena, I answered before I could overthink it. He repeated it quietly, like testing how it felt. Lena Hartley. I did not ask how he knew my last name. Of course he knew. Men like him always knew more than they should. You heard something tonight, he continued, his voice low again. Something that does not belong to you. I crossed my arms lightly, more to steady myself than to defend. I heard pieces of a conversation I did not ask to hear. Another pause. Another moment where the room seemed to lean in closer. And what will you do with those pieces? He asked. I met his gaze without hesitation. Nothing. It was the truth. I had enough in my life without carrying someone else's secrets. He watched me for a long second, searching for something in my face. A lie. Fear. Weakness. I gave him none. Not because I was not afraid, but because I had learned a long time ago that showing fear only invited more of it. Behind him, one of the men shifted again, clearly uncomfortable with the direction this was taking. Dominic noticed, but he did not look back. He stayed focused on me, like the rest of the room had faded away. You interrupted a deal, he said again, softer this time. And yet you are still standing here, arguing with me. I am not arguing, I replied. I am finishing my shift. That earned the smallest hint of something real. Not a smile, but close enough to feel like one. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small card, black with clean white lettering. He held it between his fingers for a moment, then placed it on the edge of the table, just within my reach. Finish your shift, he said. Then decide if you want to walk away from tonight. I did not move to take it. Not yet. And if I do? I asked carefully. His eyes held mine, steady and unreadable. Then tonight becomes a story you never tell, he said. And I become someone you never met. It sounded simple. Too simple. I glanced at the card, then back at him. And if I do not walk away? That was when the air shifted again, subtle but undeniable. Dominic leaned in just slightly, his voice dropping enough that only I could hear the next words. Then you step into something you cannot step out of, he said. My breath caught for half a second. Not from fear, but from the certainty in his tone. He straightened again, the moment closing as quickly as it had opened. Around us, the restaurant slowly began to breathe again. Conversations resumed in cautious whispers. Glasses moved. Music returned. But nothing felt the same. Dominic turned away from me without another word, his attention shifting back to the table, to the people waiting for him, to the world that seemed to bend around his decisions. I stood there for a second longer, staring at the card resting on the table. It looked simple, light, harmless. It was none of those things. I knew that without touching it. And still, my hand moved anyway. My fingers brushed the edge of the card, and for a second, I hesitated, like touching it would make everything real in a way I could not undo. Then I picked it up anyway. It was heavier than it looked, thick paper, clean edges, the kind of detail that spoke without trying. I did not read it right away. I just held it, feeling the weight of a decision I had not planned to make tonight. Behind me, the restaurant slowly returned to life, but the energy felt different now, quieter, more careful. People laughed again, but not as freely. Conversations resumed, but voices stayed lower, like everyone was aware they had just witnessed something they were not meant to see. I slipped the card into the pocket of my apron without looking down. Not because I was curious, but because I already knew it mattered. I turned back toward the service station, forcing my feet to move, forcing myself to finish what I started. Plates needed clearing. Orders needed delivering. Life did not stop just because something shifted, but every step felt sharper, like I was walking a line I could not see. I could feel his presence behind me even without turning around. Not watching everything, just aware of everything. There was a difference. I picked up a tray, steadied it in my hands, and moved toward another table. My motions stayed precise, controlled, practiced. No one would guess that my heart had not slowed since the moment he stepped closer. You are still here, a voice said quietly beside me. I turned slightly to find one of his men standing at the edge of the service area. He was not threatening, just observant, like he had been sent to check something. I work here, I replied, keeping my tone even. He nodded once, like that answer fit into whatever calculation he was running. Most people would have left, he said. Most people are not me, I answered. Another pause. He studied me for a second longer, then gave a small, almost respectful nod before stepping away. That unsettled me more than anything else. Respect was not something I expected from men like them. I finished clearing the table, carried the tray back, and set it down with careful precision. My hands were steady now, not because I was calm, but because I had decided to be. Across the room, Dominic had resumed his seat. The conversation at his table continued, quieter than before, more controlled. The damaged documents were gone, replaced with new ones, dry and untouched. It was like the interruption had been erased, except it had not. I knew it. He knew it. The space between us held that truth, invisible but undeniable. At one point, his gaze lifted again, finding me without effort. This time, I did not look away, but I did not hold it as long. Not out of fear, but because something about it felt different now. Less like a challenge, more like recognition. I broke the contact first and turned back to my work. Minutes passed, then an hour. My shift moved forward, one table at a time, one order at a time, until the rhythm of it almost felt normal again. Almost. When my manager finally called last orders, relief came in a quiet wave. Not because I was leaving, but because I had time to think. I stepped into the back hallway, away from the noise, away from the lights, and leaned briefly against the cool wall. My hand moved to my apron pocket before I could stop it. I pulled the card out this time and looked at it properly. Black. Minimal. A name I already knew. A number that did not look like something you dialed casually. No address. No instructions. Just an opening. I turned it over once, then again, like something else might appear if I waited long enough. It did not. It stayed simple. That was the point. Footsteps echoed softly down the hallway, and I straightened before anyone could see me hesitate. I slid the card back into my pocket just as the door behind me opened. One of the servers poked her head out, eyes wide with curiosity. "Lena, what was that out there?" she whispered. I shook my head once, already stepping past her. "Nothing I am getting involved in," I said, more to myself than to her. But even as I said it, I knew it was not true, because something had already shifted. And whether I walked away or not, tonight was not going to let me go that easily. I clocked out 10 minutes later, but the weight in my pocket made it feel like I had not left anything behind at all. The restaurant lights dimmed as I stepped outside, the cool night air brushing against my skin like a reset I did not quite believe in. The city moved the same as always, cars passing, people talking, distant sirens echoing somewhere far enough to ignore. But everything felt sharper, like I had stepped into a version of the night that noticed me back. I started walking toward the bus stop, my shoes quiet against the pavement, my mind louder than it had been all night. I told myself I was going home, that I would take a shower, get some sleep, wake up, and pretend none of this mattered. But my hand drifted to my pocket again, pressing lightly against the card like it might disappear if I did not check. It was still there. Of course it was. I let out a slow breath and kept moving. The bus arrived in 4 minutes, right on time, like the rest of my life had always tried to be. Predictable, controlled, safe. I stepped on, paid my fare, and took a seat near the back. The windows reflected the inside of the bus more than the city outside, turning everything into overlapping shadows and light. I watched my own reflection for a moment. Same face, same tired eyes, but something in them had shifted. I could see it, even if I did not want to name it yet. The bus rolled forward, carrying me away from the restaurant, from him, from everything that should have ended the moment I walked out that door. Except it did not feel like an ending. It felt like a pause. I reached into my pocket and pulled the card out again, holding it between my fingers like I had earlier, studying it under the dim overhead light. The name was simple, clean, powerful in a way that did not need explanation. Dominic Varelli. I traced the letters lightly with my thumb, then stopped myself, like even that small action crossed a line. The number beneath it stared back at me, quiet and waiting. No instructions, no pressure, just possibility. I slipped it back into my pocket before I could think too much about it. The bus made 3 stops before mine. I got off, walked the 2 blocks to my apartment, and climbed the narrow stairs that always creaked no matter how carefully I stepped. The hallway smelled faintly like old paint and someone else's dinner. Familiar, grounded, real. I unlocked my door and stepped inside, flipping on the light. The small space greeted me exactly the way I left it. Couch, table, a stack of unopened mail, everything in its place. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it for a second, letting the silence settle. No music, no voices, just the quiet hum of a life that made sense. I pushed away from the door and moved through the apartment on autopilot. Shoes off. Bag down. Hair pulled loose. Routine was easier than thinking. I walked to the sink, turned on the water, and watched it run for a moment longer than necessary. My mind kept replaying the same few seconds. His voice. His eyes. The way the room had frozen around us. I shook my head once, like that might clear it. It did not. I turned off the water and reached for the counter, steadying myself. It does not matter, I said out loud, testing the words in the empty room. They sounded thin, unconvincing. I pulled the card out again without meaning to and set it on the table in front of me. This time, I did not look away. It sat there, simple and quiet, like it had all the time in the world. I stared at it longer than I should have. Long enough for the silence to grow heavy. Long enough for a thought I did not want to admit to take shape. Walking away was supposed to be easy. That was the deal. That was the safe option. But safe had never changed anything. Not really. My phone sat on the counter a few feet away, dark and still. I glanced at it once, then back at the card. Then back at the phone again. My hand did not move right away. It stayed where it was, resting on the edge of the table, like it was waiting for permission I was not ready to give. Outside, a car passed, headlights sweeping briefly across my window before disappearing. The room dimmed again. Quiet. Still. Waiting. Just like the card. I stood there longer than I should have, staring at the phone like it might make the decision for me if I waited long enough. It did not. It stayed silent, just a piece of plastic and glass, nothing more. The choice was mine. That was the problem. I let out a slow breath and reached for it, my fingers wrapping around it with a steadiness I did not feel. I told myself I was only going to look. Nothing more. I unlocked the screen and opened the keypad, the numbers waiting like they had been expecting me all along. My other hand slid the card closer, placing it beside the phone. Simple. Clean. Dangerous in the quietest way possible. I read the number once. Then again, memorizing it before I could change my mind. This does not mean anything, I said softly, like saying it out loud would make it true. My thumb hovered over the screen, just above the first digit. I hesitated for 1 second longer, then pressed it. The sound was soft, barely audible, but it echoed louder in my head than anything else that night. One number became 2. 2 became 3. Before I could stop myself, the entire sequence was there, staring back at me. I did not give myself time to think. I pressed call. The ringing started immediately. One tone, then another. Each one stretched just enough to make me aware of what I had done. My heart beat in time with it, steady but heavy. On the third ring, the line clicked. Silence filled the space before a voice answered, calm and unfamiliar. This line is reserved, the man said. Not a question, not surprised, just a statement. I swallowed once, steadying my voice before I spoke. Then I guess I am calling the right number. A brief pause followed. Not confusion, more like recognition of something unexpected. Who is this? He asked. Lena Hartley. I did not add anything else. I did not need to. Another pause. Slightly longer this time. I could almost hear the shift on the other end, like information moving through invisible channels. One moment, the man said, and the line went quiet again. No music. No hold tone. Just silence. I stood there, phone pressed to my ear, staring at the card like it might explain what came next. My apartment felt smaller suddenly, the walls closer, the air heavier. I had crossed something. I knew that now. There was no pretending this was nothing. The line clicked again, softer this time. And then his voice filled the space, low and unmistakable. You made a decision faster than I expected. I closed my eyes for half a second, steadying myself before I answered. I have never liked unfinished conversations. A faint exhale came through the line, almost like a quiet approval. And yet you walked away earlier, he said. I finished my shift, I replied. Now I am finishing this. Silence followed again, but it felt different now. Less like distance. More like attention. Do you always step toward things you do not understand? He asked. I opened my eyes, focusing on the card still resting on the table. Only when walking away feels worse. Another pause. Then, softer, almost thoughtful. That is a dangerous instinct. I have had worse, I said before I could stop myself. The words slipped out, honest and unguarded. I heard it the moment they left me. So did he. The line stayed quiet just long enough to make me aware of it. Where are you? He asked finally. The question came without pressure, but it carried weight anyway. I hesitated, just for a second, then answered. At home. Alone, he added, not asking. I did not respond. I did not need to. He already knew. Another brief silence. Then, give me 10 minutes, he said. Do not leave. The words were calm. Controlled. Not a demand. Not quite a request either. I frowned slightly, my grip tightening on the phone. I did not say I was going anywhere. I replied. A pause. Then something shifted in his tone, almost imperceptible, but enough to feel. Good, he said quietly. The line disconnected before I could ask anything else. I lowered the phone slowly, staring at the dark screen as it reflected my face back at me. 10 minutes. That was all he had said. No explanation. No plan. Just time. I set the phone down carefully, like it might break if I moved too fast. My apartment felt different now. Not unsafe. Just no longer mine in the way it had been an hour ago. I glanced toward the door, then back at the card on the table. My pulse had not slowed. Not since the moment I dialed. I walked to the window, pulling the curtain back just enough to see the street below. Cars passed. People walked. Everything looked normal. That was the unsettling part. Because I knew something was about to change. And this time, I had chosen it myself. The first minute passed slower than anything I had ever experienced, each second stretching just enough to make me aware of the choice I had already made. I stayed by the window, watching the street like I expected something to appear out of nothing. Nothing did. Cars came and went. A couple laughed across the street. Someone walked their dog past the corner light. Normal. Completely normal. That was what made it feel unreal. I checked the time on my phone. 2 minutes gone. 8 left. My fingers tapped lightly against the glass, not out of impatience, but to give my hands something to do. I had always been good at waiting. Long shifts, late buses, quiet nights that stretched longer than they should. But this felt different. This was not waiting for something familiar. This was waiting for something I had stepped into without understanding. I let the curtain fall back into place and turned away from the window. The room felt smaller again, like the walls were paying attention. I walked to the table and picked up the card, holding it between my fingers once more. It had not changed. Of course it had not. But I had. I could feel it in the way my thoughts moved, sharper, more focused, less willing to ignore things I usually would. 5 minutes left. I set the card down and paced once across the room. Then again, my steps quiet against the floor. I stopped myself after the second turn, pressing my palm lightly against the edge of the counter. You made the call, I said under my breath. Now wait. It sounded simple when I said it like that. It was not. The silence stretched again, but this time it felt charged, like something was moving toward me even if I could not see it yet. Then, faintly, I heard it. Not loud. Not obvious. Just the soft hum of a car slowing down outside. My breath caught before I could stop it. I moved back to the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to look. A black car had stopped near the curb. Clean. Unmarked. The kind of car you would not notice unless you were looking for it. The engine stayed running. No one stepped out right away. I watched, my pulse steady but heavy, as the driver's side door finally opened. A man stepped out, dressed in dark clothing, posture straight, movements controlled. He did not look up at my window. He did not need to. He walked toward the building entrance like he had been here before. Like he knew exactly where he was going. My grip tightened slightly on the curtain. 10 minutes. I whispered, more to myself than anything else. He had meant it. Exactly 10 minutes. Not 11. Not 9. Precision like that was not casual. It was habit. I let the curtain fall again and stepped back, my mind moving faster now, connecting things I had not wanted to connect before. This was real. Not a conversation. Not a moment in a restaurant. This was something that moved beyond that. Something that could reach me here. The knock came exactly 30 seconds later. 3 firm taps against the door. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just certain. I stared at the door for a moment, my body still while everything inside me shifted. I had expected something like this. I had not expected how quickly it would happen. The knock came again. Same rhythm. Same certainty. I walked toward the door slowly, each step measured, controlled. I stopped just short of it, my hand hovering near the handle. I did not open it right away. Who is it? I asked, my voice steady through the wood. A brief pause followed. Then, calm and clear, you asked for a continuation, the man said. This is it. Not an answer. Not really. But it was enough. I closed my eyes for half a second, grounding myself before I made the next move. Then I opened them and turned the handle. The door swung open slowly, revealing the man from the car standing in the hallway, his expression neutral, his presence quiet but deliberate. "Lena Hartley," he said, confirming what he already knew. I nodded once, not stepping back, not inviting him in either. He did not try to enter. He simply extended his hand slightly, not to touch me, but to indicate something behind him. "He does not like to wait," he said. I followed the direction of his gesture without moving from where I stood. The hallway stretched empty behind him, quiet and still, leading back toward the stairs. "And what if I do?" I asked, meeting his eyes again. For the first time, something shifted in his expression. Not surprise, not disapproval, just a subtle acknowledgement. "Then he waits," the man replied calmly. "But he will not leave." I kept my hand on the door, not moving aside, not closing it either, holding the moment in place like I needed to understand it before letting it continue. The man did not rush me. He stood there with the same quiet patience, like time worked differently for him. "You said he would not leave," I said, my voice calm but deliberate. "That does not mean I have to follow." His gaze stayed steady, respectful but firm. "No," he agreed. "You do not have to." The simplicity of that answer made something tighten in my chest. No pressure, no force, just a choice that somehow felt heavier than any demand could have been. I glanced past him again, down the hallway, toward the stairs that led out into the night I had just come from. It was still there, still mine. I could close the door right now and everything would stop. Or at least it would look like it had. I shifted my weight slightly, feeling the ground beneath me like I needed to confirm it was still solid. "Where is he?" I asked. The man stepped back half a pace, giving me space without breaking eye contact. "He prefers not to be seen until it matters," he said. Not an answer. Not fully, but enough. I let out a quiet breath, my mind moving through possibilities I did not like. Control, precision, distance. Everything about this was intentional. "So I am supposed to walk out there," I said, gesturing faintly toward the hallway, "and trust that this is not a mistake." The man did not react to the edge in my voice. "You already decided it was not a mistake when you made the call," he replied. That landed harder than I expected. Because it was true. I had crossed that line minutes ago. This was just the next step. I looked back into my apartment for a second, taking in the small, familiar space. The couch. The table. The quiet life that made sense because it stayed predictable. It had always been enough. Until tonight. My hand tightened slightly on the door handle. "Give me a second," I said. The man nodded once, stepping back another inch, allowing me to close the door without comment. I did. The lock clicked into place behind me, the sound sharper than usual. I leaned against it for a brief moment, closing my eyes as I let the silence settle one last time. This was the last moment where everything was still mine. I pushed away from the door and moved quickly, grabbing my jacket from the back of the chair, slipping it on without thinking. My hand brushed the edge of the table, where the card had been earlier. It was no longer there. It was in my pocket, where it had been the moment I decided to call. I checked once anyway, fingers pressing against the fabric, confirming its presence. Still there. Still real. I walked back to the door, my steps steady now, my mind clearer than it had been all night. Not calm, but decided. I unlocked it and pulled it open again. The man was still there, exactly where I had left him, like he had not moved at all. His eyes flicked briefly to my jacket, then back to my face. "You are coming," he said, not asking. I stepped past him into the hallway, pulling the door closed behind me without hesitation. "I am walking," I corrected quietly. Something in his expression shifted again, a small acknowledgement that I had not given anything away I did not choose to give. He turned without another word and started toward the stairs. I followed, my footsteps matching his pace, neither of us rushing, neither of us slowing. The building felt different from this side, the narrow hallway stretching longer than it had before, the shadows deeper under the dim lights. We reached the stairs, and he moved down them with practiced ease. I followed, my hand brushing the railing lightly, grounding myself with each step. One floor, then another, then the final landing that led to the exit. The door at the bottom opened with a soft push, letting in the cool night air again. I stepped outside, the streetlights casting long shadows across the pavement. The car was still there, engine running, exactly where I had seen it from my window. The driver did not look at me. He did not need to. The man beside me moved toward the back door and opened it smoothly, stepping aside to let me decide. I stopped for a second, standing just outside the car, looking at the open door like it was another line I could still refuse to cross. The city moved around me, distant and unchanged. But this moment felt separate from it, like stepping into something that did not follow the same rules. "He is waiting," the man said quietly. I looked at him once, then at the car, then straight ahead. "Then he can wait one more second," I replied, taking a breath that felt deeper than any I had taken all night. And then I stepped inside. The door closed behind me with a soft, final sound that felt louder than it should have, like it marked a line I could not step back across. The interior of the car was quiet, the kind of silence that did not need to prove anything. I sat down slowly, my movements controlled, aware of every detail, without turning my head too quickly. The leather seat was cool beneath me, the air inside faintly scented with something clean and expensive. The man who had come to my door shut it gently, then moved around to the front without a word. I did not look back. I did not need to. I could feel the shift in the space before I saw him. "You kept me waiting," Dominic said from the seat across from me. His voice was calm, almost conversational, but it carried the same weight as before. I turned my head slightly, meeting his gaze directly. He sat with one arm resting along the side, posture relaxed but deliberate, like every inch of space around him belonged to him without question. "You said 10 minutes, I replied. "I took 10 minutes. A faint pause followed, then something close to approval flickered in his expression. "Most people would have taken less," he said. "Most people are not deciding whether to step into something they do not understand," I answered. The car began to move, smooth and steady, the city outside shifting past the tinted windows in blurred lights and quiet motion. He watched me for a second longer, not interrupting, not pushing, just observing. "And what did you decide?" he asked finally. I leaned back slightly, keeping my posture open but controlled. "I decided that walking away would not change anything," I said. "It would just leave questions I would eventually come back to." He tilted his head a fraction, studying the words, not just hearing them. "Curiosity can be expensive," he said. "So can silence," I replied. The corner of his mouth moved again, that same subtle shift I had seen earlier, like he appreciated the answer without saying it outright. The car turned onto a quieter street, the noise of the city softening around us. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence felt different here. Not tense, not empty, just measured. "You are not afraid," he said after a while. It was not a question. I considered that for a second before answering. "I am careful," I said. "There is a difference." His gaze held mine, steady and sharp, like he was testing the truth of that. "Fear keeps people alive," he said. "Fear also keeps people stuck," I replied. Another pause, this one longer. Then he leaned forward slightly, closing the distance just enough to shift the space between us. "And what do you think this is?" he asked, his voice lower now, more focused. "A way out, or a way in?" I did not answer immediately. I let the question settle, feeling its weight before I responded. "I think it is both," I said. "It depends on who is asking." His eyes did not leave mine, not even for a second. "And who do you think I am?" he asked. That question landed differently, not because I did not have an answer, but because I knew none of them would be enough. "Someone who does not like losing control," I said carefully, "and someone who notices when something does not follow the rules." The car slowed slightly, stopping at a quiet intersection where the streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement. The pause felt intentional, like the world outside had stepped back again. Dominic did not look away. "You interrupted something important tonight," he said. "And instead of apologizing, you challenged me." "You challenged me first," I replied. A beat passed, then another. Then he exhaled softly, not frustrated, not dismissive, just acknowledging something unspoken. "And now you are here," he said, "in a car you did not plan to enter, going somewhere you did not ask about." I glanced briefly at the window, then back at him. "And yet I am not asking you to stop," I said. That seemed to settle something. Not fully, but enough. The car started moving again, turning onto a street I did not recognize, the lights growing dimmer, the buildings quieter. "Then let me make one thing clear," he said, his tone shifting just slightly, not harsher, but more defined. "You are not here because I need you." I held his gaze, not reacting, letting him finish. "You are here because you chose to be," he continued. "And that means every step after this is yours to take." I nodded once, understanding the weight of that more than the words themselves. "Good," I said quietly. He leaned back again, the space between us widening just enough to breathe. Then we understand each other, he said. I did not answer right away. I looked out the window once more, the city now unfamiliar, distant from everything I had known just an hour ago. Then I looked back at him. Not yet, I said, but I think we are about to. The car slowed again, but this time it did not stop at an intersection. It turned smoothly into a private drive, the city noise fading almost instantly as the gate ahead opened without hesitation. I did not see anyone press a button. It just responded. That told me everything I needed to know. This was not a place people stumbled into. The car rolled forward, the gravel beneath the tires soft but deliberate, each movement controlled like everything else tonight. I watched through the window as the buildings around us changed. Less crowded, more space, more distance, the kind of place where silence meant something. I shifted slightly in my seat, not tense, but aware. Every detail mattered now. The car came to a stop in front of a structure that did not try to impress. It did not need to. Clean lines, dark windows, subtle lighting. Power that did not announce itself still carried weight. The driver stepped out first, moving with the same quiet efficiency as before. The man who had brought me from my apartment opened the door beside me, stepping back just enough to give me room. I did not move right away. I looked at Dominic instead. He had not rushed. He had not looked at his phone. He had not once seemed unsure. This is where I decide if I made a mistake, I said quietly. His gaze met mine without hesitation. You decided that already, he replied. This is where you understand it. I held that for a second, then nodded once, more to myself than to him. I stepped out of the car. The air felt different here. Cooler. Stiller. Like the space itself was controlled as tightly as everything else tonight. The door closed behind me with a soft click, sealing that moment in place. I adjusted my jacket slightly, grounding myself before I looked around fully. No crowd. No noise. Just a few lights, carefully placed, and the structure in front of me waiting without pressure. You came alone, I said, glancing at Dominic again as he stepped out after me. I came with enough, he replied. Not defensive, not dismissive, just certain. I exhaled slowly, letting that settle. And what exactly is enough? I asked. He stepped closer, not invading my space, but closing it just enough to make the conversation feel direct. Control, he said simply. I considered that for a second, then gave a small nod. It fit. Everything about him fit that word. He gestured toward the entrance, not commanding, not insisting, just indicating the next step. I looked at the door, then back at him. You are not going to tell me what this place is, I said. You will see it, he replied. I hesitated for half a second, then moved forward. The door opened before I reached it, smooth and silent, revealing a space that felt even more controlled than outside. Clean, minimal, intentional, no excess, no distraction. I stepped inside, my senses adjusting to the quiet shift in light and space. My footsteps echoed just slightly, enough to remind me I was somewhere unfamiliar. Dominic followed without sound, the door closing behind him with the same quiet finality as everything else tonight. I turned slowly, taking in the room without rushing. Nothing obvious stood out. No display, no statement, just presence. You do not bring people here often, I said. It was not a question. He did not answer immediately. He watched me instead, like he was measuring something I had not said out loud yet. No, he said finally. I do not. That confirmed what I already felt. This was not routine. This was not part of his usual world. This was something else. Something chosen. I walked a few steps further into the room, stopping when it felt right. I did not explore. I did not touch anything. I just stood there, letting the space settle around me. Then why me? I asked, turning back to him. The question hung between us, clear and direct. He did not look away, not even for a second. Because you did not react the way you were supposed to, he said. I let out a quiet breath, almost a laugh, but not quite. That is not always a good thing, I said. Tonight it was, he replied. Another pause followed. This one heavier, more real. And now, I said slowly, you want to see what happens next. His expression did not change, but something in his gaze sharpened. No, he said. Now I want to see if you understand what you stepped into. I held his gaze, steady and unflinching. Then I guess this is the part where you explain it, I said. A faint shift crossed his expression, something unreadable but intentional. No, he replied again, quieter this time. This is the part where you choose whether you want to learn it. I did not answer right away, because for the first time that night, the silence did not feel like something I needed to break. It felt like something I needed to understand. I let his words settle, not rushing to respond, not filling the space with something easy. Choice. That was what he kept bringing it back to. Not control. Not pressure. Choice. And somehow that made it harder to walk away. I shifted my weight slightly, letting my eyes move around the room again, taking in the details I had not fully noticed before. There were no distractions here. No noise. No excess. Just intention. Everything placed where it belonged. Everything serving a purpose. It was not just a space. It was a reflection. I turned back to him slowly. If I say no, I said, my voice even, what happens? He did not hesitate. You leave, he replied. And nothing from tonight follows you. The answer came too clean, too certain. I held his gaze, searching for something behind it. And you expect me to believe that, I said. He stepped forward a fraction, not closing the space entirely, but enough to make the conversation feel sharper. I do not expect anything from you, he said. I told you already. This is your choice. I exhaled quietly, not frustrated, but aware that he was not going to make this easier. He was not going to give me something to push against. He was giving me exactly what I asked for. Freedom. And somehow that felt more complicated than anything else. I glanced down for a second, then back up at him. And if I stay, I said. This time he paused. Not long. Just enough to make the answer feel deliberate. Then you learn, he said. Not everything. Not all at once. But enough to understand what you stepped into. I crossed my arms loosely, not defensive, just grounding myself. And why would you offer that? I asked. Because I spilled water on your deal. A faint shift touched his expression again, something quieter, more internal. Because you did not act like someone who belongs on the outside of it, he said. That landed differently. Not like a compliment. Not like a threat. Just a statement. I let that sit for a second, feeling the weight of it without reacting immediately. You are assuming a lot, I said. No, he replied. I am observing. The difference mattered. I could hear it in the way he said it. I walked a few steps to the side, not leaving the space, just moving through it, letting my mind catch up with everything that had happened since the restaurant. You saw one moment, I said. One reaction. And you think that defines anything? I continued. He did not interrupt. He let me finish. It defines how you respond under pressure, he said. And that matters more than anything you say when things are easy. I stopped moving, turning back toward him fully. You think I am not under pressure right now? I asked. His gaze held steady. You are, he said. And you are still here. Another pause. Another layer added to something I had not expected to build this quickly. I let out a slow breath, my thoughts clearer now, more focused than they had been since I stepped into the car. You keep saying this is my choice, I said. But every step feels like it was already set up before I got here. That time, he did react. Not visibly, not dramatically, just a slight narrowing of his eyes, like he had been waiting for that question. The path was there, he said. You decided to take it. I considered that, turning it over in my mind. It was not an answer that removed responsibility. It placed it exactly where it belonged. On me. I nodded once, slow and deliberate. Then I want to understand something clearly, I said. His attention sharpened again, focused entirely on me. If I choose to stay, I continued, this is not about control. This is not about you deciding what I become. The words came out steady, grounded, leaving no space for interpretation. He did not interrupt. He did not dismiss it. He waited. This is about me deciding what I learn. I finished. The silence that followed felt different from the others. Not uncertain. Not testing. Just real. Dominic took a step closer, closing the space between us just enough to make his next words land without distraction. Then we understand each other, he said quietly. I held his gaze for a second longer, then gave a small nod. Not completely, I said, but enough to take the next step. And this time, when the silence settled again, it did not feel like something I needed to break. It felt like something I had chosen to step into. The moment settled between us, not heavy, not light, just defined, like a line drawn clearly enough that neither of us needed to question it anymore. I did not move right away. I let the choice I had just made settle into something real, something that would not disappear the second I stepped outside. Dominic watched me in that same quiet way, not pushing, not filling the silence, just present in it. Then start, I said finally. The words came out steady, without hesitation, but they carried more weight than anything I had said before. His gaze shifted slightly, not away, but deeper, like he was measuring the difference between curiosity and commitment. You do not start by being told everything, he said. You start by seeing what matters. I exhaled slowly, not frustrated, but aware that this was not going to follow any path I recognized. Then show me what matters, I replied. A faint pause followed. Then he turned slightly, gesturing toward a hallway that extended beyond the room I had entered. It had been there the entire time. I just had not focused on it until now. Walk, he said simply. I did not hesitate this time. I moved forward, my steps quiet but deliberate, my attention sharper than it had been all night. The hallway was longer than it first appeared, the lighting subtle, designed to guide rather than reveal. Each step forward felt like moving further away from everything I had known before tonight. Not physically, but in a way that mattered more. Dominic followed behind me, not close enough to crowd the space, but near enough that I could feel his presence without turning around. It was not pressure. It was awareness. At the end of the hallway, the space opened into another room. Larger, still minimal, still controlled, but different. This space was not empty. It was active, not with noise, not with movement, but with purpose. There were screens along one wall, dimly lit, displaying information that shifted in quiet patterns. Numbers, locations, timelines. I did not understand any of it fully, but I understood enough to recognize structure, organization, control on a level I had never seen before. I stepped further inside, my eyes moving slowly across the room, taking in details without rushing to define them. This is what you protect, I said, not turning around. It was not a guess. It was a recognition. Dominic stepped closer, stopping just behind me, his voice low but clear. This is what I manage, he corrected. The distinction mattered. I could hear it in the way he said it. I nodded once, letting that settle. And you think I belong anywhere near this? I asked quietly. This time, the pause behind me lasted longer. Not hesitation. Consideration. I think you do not belong outside of it, he said. I turned slowly, meeting his gaze again. That is a dangerous assumption, I said. It is an observation, he replied. I almost smiled at that, not because it was funny, but because it was consistent. He had not changed his approach once. Not in the restaurant. Not in the car. Not here. Everything about him stayed aligned with the same logic. That made him predictable in a way that mattered. You keep saying that, I said. Observation. Because it is accurate, he answered. I looked back at the screens for a second, watching the information shift, patterns forming and dissolving in ways I could not fully follow. You see patterns, I said. You see how things move before they happen. And you think I fit into that somehow. I turned back to him again, waiting. His gaze held steady, not defensive, not uncertain. You do not fit into it, he said. You disrupt it. That stopped me. Not because I did not understand the words, but because I understood them too well. That is not something people usually want, I said. People like control. People like predictability. He stepped closer, closing the space just enough to shift the energy again. I already have both, he said quietly. The words were not arrogant. They were factual. That made them heavier. What I do not have, he continued, is someone who does not respond to it the way everyone else does. I held his gaze, letting the meaning settle without reacting immediately. So this is not about what I can learn, I said slowly. It is about what I change. The silence that followed felt different again. Not testing, not uncertain, just real. Dominic did not look away. Everything you step into changes, he said. The question is whether you understand the cost of that. I took a slow breath, my eyes flicking once more toward the screens, the room, the structure of something much bigger than I had expected to see tonight. Then I looked back at him. And you think I do not, I said. He did not answer right away. He let the silence settle between us one more time, deliberate and controlled. Then, quietly, I think you are about to. I did not look away this time, not from him, not from the weight of what he had just said, because something in me already understood that there was no easy version of what came next. The room felt quieter, not empty, but focused, like everything inside it was waiting for something to shift. I let my eyes move back to the screens for a moment, watching the information change in ways I could not fully track, but could still feel. Patterns, movement, Decisions being made somewhere I could not see. You said I disrupted. I said slowly, my voice steady but more thoughtful now. That means something here does not work the way it is supposed to. Dominic did not answer immediately. He stepped slightly to the side, not blocking my view, but aligning himself with it, like he wanted me to see the same thing he did. It means something here is predictable, he said. And predictable things can be controlled. I nodded once, understanding the logic even if I did not know the details. And you think I am not predictable, I said. He looked at me then, fully, not at the room, not at the screens, just at me. You are not, he replied. Not because you are random, but because you do not respond the way people expect. I let that settle, not reacting right away, just feeling the truth in it. It was not something I had ever defined before, but hearing it like that made it clearer. That does not mean I understand any of this, I said. You do not need to understand everything, he said. You need to understand enough to see what matters. I exhaled slowly, letting my attention return to the screens again. Then show me something that matters, I said. This time he moved. Not quickly, not dramatically, just a quiet step toward one of the displays. He reached out, tapping the surface once, and the information shifted, reorganizing itself into something simpler. Cleaner, more focused. I stepped closer, my eyes narrowing slightly as I tried to follow what I was seeing. There were names. Not full ones. Just fragments. Initials. Locations. Timelines that overlapped in ways that were not obvious at first glance. But there was a pattern there. I could feel it. These are people, I said, more to myself than to him. These are decisions, he corrected. I glanced at him, then back at the screen. People make decisions, I said. And decisions change everything, he replied. The room felt smaller suddenly, not in size, but in clarity, like the lines between things were becoming more defined. I studied the screen longer, letting my mind move through the information without forcing it. Something here does not fit, I said after a moment. He did not respond. That told me I was looking in the right direction. I stepped closer, focusing on one part of the display where the timing did not align the way the rest did. This overlaps wrong, I said quietly. It is too early. Silence. Then, explain, he said. I did not turn to him. I kept my eyes on the screen, tracing the pattern again in my mind before I spoke. If this moves here, I said, pointing lightly, then this should shift later. But it does not. I paused, letting the thought settle before finishing. That means someone changed something without following the pattern. The silence that followed was not empty. It was sharp, focused, different from anything before. I felt it before I saw it. When I finally turned, Dominic was watching me in a way he had not before. Not testing, not observing, recognizing. You saw that quickly, he said. It was not praise. It was acknowledgement. I shrugged slightly, not dismissing it, but not claiming more than it was. It is obvious once you stop trying to understand everything, I said. You just look for what does not belong. He held that for a second, then gave a small nod, like something had just confirmed itself. That is what matters, he said. I glanced back at the screen, then at him again. So something here does not belong, I said. And you brought me here to see it. He stepped closer, just enough to shift the space between us again. I brought you here, he said quietly, to see if you could. The difference mattered. I could feel it now, clearer than before. This was not about showing me something. It was about letting me reveal it. I let out a slow breath, my thoughts settling into something more defined, more certain. And now that I have, I said, what happens next? The room seemed to hold that question for a moment, the screen still shifting quietly behind me, the patterns continuing whether I understood them or not. Dominic did not answer right away. He looked at me, not past me, not through me, just at me, like he was measuring something that had not been there before. Then, finally, now you decide if you want to be part of it, he said. The question did not feel like a question. It felt like a door already open, waiting for me to decide if I would step through it or walk away and pretend I never saw what was on the other side. I looked back at the screen one more time, at the pattern I had already started to understand, and then at him. You already know my answer, I said quietly. Dominic did not smile. He did not react in any obvious way, but something in the space between us shifted, like a decision had finally taken shape. Say it anyway, he replied. His voice was calm, but it carried something deeper now. Not pressure, not control, just certainty that words mattered. I held his gaze for a second longer, then nodded once. I said. The words settled into the room without echo, but they felt heavier than anything I had said all night. Not because they were dramatic, because they were final. Dominic watched me closely, not surprised, not relieved, just present in the moment. Then understand this clearly, he said. You are not stepping into my world. I frowned slightly, the words not matching what I expected. Then what am I stepping into? I asked. He took one step closer, closing the distance just enough to make his next words impossible to ignore. You are stepping into a space where your choices matter as much as mine, he said. That stopped me. Not because I did not understand it, but because I did. Completely. That is not how power usually works, I said. That is because this is not about power, he replied. I let out a quiet breath, my thoughts shifting again, adjusting to something I had not considered before. Then what is it about? I asked. He did not answer right away. He turned slightly, his attention moving back to the screen for a moment, like he was grounding the answer in something real before he gave it. Control without understanding breaks, he said. Understanding without control is useless. He looked back at me. This is about balance. The words settled differently than everything else. Not sharp, not heavy, just precise. I nodded slowly, letting it take shape in my mind. And you think I can be part of that? I said. I think you already are, he replied. Another pause followed, but this one felt different. Not uncertain, not testing, just quiet recognition of something that had already happened. I glanced back at the screen, then around the room again, taking in the space with new awareness. Nothing had changed, but everything felt clearer. Then what happens now? I asked. This time, he did not hesitate. Now you leave, he said. I looked back at him, caught off guard by the simplicity of it. That is it, I asked. That is it for tonight, he corrected. I crossed my arms lightly, not defensive, just grounding myself again. You bring me here, show me all of this, and then send me back, I said. Yes, he replied. The answer was immediate. Certain. I studied him for a second, searching for something more, something hidden behind it. Why, I asked. He held my gaze without hesitation. Because if you stay now, he said, it becomes my decision. The logic landed instantly. Clean. Unavoidable. I let out a slow breath, nodding once as I understood. And you do not want that, I said. No, he replied. I want you to choose this again. That changed everything. Not the situation. The weight of it. This was not a moment. It was the beginning of something that required more than one decision. More than one step. I looked down for a second, then back up at him. You are giving me a way out, I said. I am giving you a way to stay on your own terms, he corrected. I considered that, turning it over in my mind, feeling the difference between the two. It mattered. More than I expected. I nodded once, slower this time. Then I will leave, I said, and I will decide again. He stepped back slightly, creating space where there had not been any before. Good, he said quietly. The word was simple, but it carried something real behind it. Not approval, not control, just acknowledgement. I took one last look at the room, at the screens, at the patterns I had only begun to understand. Then I turned toward the hallway without hesitation. My steps were steady now, not uncertain, not rushed, just deliberate. As I reached the doorway, I paused for a fraction of a second, then looked back at him one last time. Next time, I said. He met my gaze without hesitation. Next time, he repeated. And for the first time that night, the silence that followed did not feel like something waiting to be broken. It felt like something already set in motion.